So what I want to, in a way, what you're going to see here now is not like Helen, it's not an introduction to spiders. Just an idea, Mick, and I don't know, just interesting, you talked about what can Big do.
Yeah.
One thing I would love to see, something like monthly talks or perhaps bi-monthly talks, where a speaker such as myself could have 2 hours to give a presentation on a formal group. Rather than trying to pack everything into 20 minutes and get ushered along for time. So just a suggestion. So, as I said, I'm the counter recorder. As it happens, I'm also president of the British Arachnological Society at the moment as well. So, and Martin's run away. Where am I pointing at, Martin? You're
pointing the right place. He just needs to come back to life. Try again.
There we go. So this is about probably all I'm going to say about spiders generally as a group. I'm the recorder for Arachnida. I'm not going to touch on pseudoscorpions or on harvestmen this morning. I am going to talk principally about spiders. One, because there are more of them. Secondly, they're easier to find. So we have 40 families of spiders, about 670 species. So if you think about British birds, almost the same number of species on the list in the UK. But almost half of those are money spiders. So it's a broad group. Everyone thinks money spiders, these little tiny things that float down on silk in the autumn. They're not all small. In fact, some of the money spiders are actually bigger than some of what you might class, if you're into moths, as macro spiders. But a lot of diversity, and they're also very common. Obviously, whenever you talk about spiders, you have people that are arachnophobes. They go, I don't. So do you realise how common they are? And this very famous book, if you can still get a copy, actually it's fairly easy to find. It's probably still one of the best books.
There's one on my table.
So everyone will rush for that. Written by Bill Bristow in the 1950s, part of the New Naturalist series. But he did a survey in a Sussex field. Okay, when he did it, it was by the acre. But he estimated that there were 2 million individual spiders per acre. That works out at almost 500 per square metre. So if you scare the spiders, don't step outside of the house. Actually interesting, we took the BS members weekend up to the island of, is it called Cambrai or Cambrai, in the Clyde. It's a place where Glaswegians, a lot of them go out for day trips or holidays, and we were up there for 2 days, staying there. And a group of girls, teenagers, they come down to some of the beach, said, what are you doing? We were looking under cobbles. Oh, we're looking for spiders. I said, do you realise how common they are? And I started turning over these. They ran away, they left the beach. Whoops. So let's talk about spiders in Buckinghamshire. And what you're going to see over the next 15 minutes are actually a variety of maps. I'm going to point out now that the map you've got here is the map of the county of Buckinghamshire, and what this is showing is all of the records that we have of spiders from the county. This map comes from the Spider Recording Scheme website, and Martin touched on it. This website was based entirely on the software MapMate. Anybody that uses MapMate will know that that is no longer supported, which caused bit of alarm within the BAS, but fortunately we were ahead of the curve. I'm going to come to that later. But this is one of the old maps. It is something that is, or was at least, updated as records went in. So you could look there and you can have the very latest records, as long as they've been uploaded by the area organisers, available for every county in the country. So I've just picked up Buckinghamshire, that's relevant this morning. And we have, based on the records in SRS, 355 species recorded in the county of that 670. So it's not a bad total, but the number at the bottom is more concerning. In SRS there are only just under 6,000 individual records of spiders from the county. But if you think people like Martin and, well, Sue's apps probably aren't in here, Sue's goes straight into iRecord. But if you think, you know, Spider Recording Scheme's been going since the end of the 1960s. So to have that few number of records in the county, we need more spider recorders. And that's really what this talk this morning is going to be about. How do you go about it? How do you get your records in? And compare it to other counties. Well, Dorset's top of the list. Okay, it's further south. A lot of history there. People like Picard Cambridge wrote a beautiful book. If you can ever get hands on it, you'd be paying over £100 for the book, The Spiders of Dorset. But others obviously spend a lot of time in the county, is top of the list at 491. So a lot to go for. I asked how many people here record spiders. I think historically, people have been very put off because most of the books were based on genitalia. So I'll show a picture of the book later. Some of you will know it, the Wild Guides book to Britain Spiders, written by Lawrence B. Some of you will know Lawrence, together with Jeff Oxford and Helen Smith. But prior to that, even the Collins Field Guide, it was called the Collins Field Guide, it's still available. It shows pictures of genitalia. That's how you're identifying a spider. Well, you need a microscope to do that, so it's hardly a field guide. It's a useful book, but it's not a field guide. I think that put a lot of people off. But let's not forget there are actually quite a number of species, probably somewhere around about 150. As we learn more, that's changing, that you can look at and say, I know what that is. I don't need to look at the genitalia of that spider. As a lot of people in this room wouldn't need to look at the genitalia of that spider and say immediately it's the garden or bed spider, Araneus diatomatus. Another one, fairly similar. These are actually both the same species. One's green, one's brown, and it does come in other colour forms. This isn't geographic variation. Both of these spiders were photographed at the same place in Buckinghamshire, actually at Foxgate Reservoir. Tends to like rank vegetation. And it's reputed, obviously depends when you take an individual, to be our heaviest spider in Britain. So this is a big, gravid female. But again, you look at that, you don't need to look at its genitalia. In fact, I'd actively discourage you from looking at genitalia because, yeah, it might be experience, but you're killing a spider for no necessity. And then others like this. I'm sure everyone will have seen pictures of this. You may not always have seen them. But it's now very much in the county. So Agiopes brunestei, the wasp spider, first recorded in Britain, in Kent, in early 1900s. If you look at some of the time maps on the SRS website, that you can actually go back to a particular year and see where the records were. The records started in Kent, around Portsmouth, Southampton, and down in Plymouth. Don't need too much intelligence to say, well, hang on, those are all around ports. This is a very common spider in continental Europe. So it's very probable, certainly the first records of the spider were coming in on freight from the continent, but it is now spreading through, well, I haven't got a UK map, but spreading through the UK. These are the records in Buckinghamshire. Now, I said it's a very common spider, it's one people love to see. Wouldn't say it's really common, but nevertheless, there's a reasonable number of records in Bucks and going up into Northamptonshire and down into Berkshire. But this is one of the dangers of recording spiders spasmodically. You kind of look at the really attractive one and say, I'm going to put a record in for that. But if you aren't recording other things, and this is really to illustrate that. So here's a map of another species. Must be equally scarce as wasp spider, would you say? Similar number of dots on the map, fairly similar distribution. I would almost guarantee that every one of you has this spider in your house. It is Pholcus phalangioides, or commonly known as the daddy longlegs spider. This spider is everywhere. I'm sure if we spend a little bit of time looking around the room, in here, we find it somewhere, probably in the toilets or something like that. But if we just go back to that, hardly any records of it. So I know it's not unique to spiders, but that sort of bias, something really colourful, something easy to identify, something you've wanted to see because you've seen lots of pictures. I'm going to stick that record in, but we forget the more common, which of course distorts data sets. So daddy longlegs spider, it's easy to identify. You don't need to do genitalia on that either. So let's get the records in and let's complete that map. So let's now just come back to the county. So again, this is a map taken out of the current Spider Recording Scheme website. But as you can see, and maybe you can't all read the numbers, but the numbers in the 10K squares there are actually the number of species recorded from that square. So, down here, Helen, I'm going to say they're all Helen's records. I know Martin's done a lot of recording down there. We've got Burnham Beeches down here, so we've got 221 here. And then somewhere up around Milton Keynes, there's actually quite a number of records. To make that a little bit easier to read, I've put that. I sometimes look at the county map. I've lived here nearly all my life. But if you draw an outline and say, where are we? That is Aylesbury. So that gives you an idea of the county. Obviously, Milton Keynes in the top right, Buckingham about where it says the 33, and then you've got the other towns lower down. But same data essentially, but now 2K squares. Intensity, so the deep red ones are where we've got the most records. So again, pockets down here around Burnham Beeches, and a huge number up in Milton Keynes. Curious? Not aware of anyone recording spiders in Milton Keynes, not from the county. And this again shows the skew on this data set. That's based on development and environmental impact assessments and people doing surveys. It's bringing professional ecologists who get paid to go out and tap all these squares and come up with all the money spiders, because that's where the diversity is. So we've got a huge number of records in Milton Keynes, but again, it's distorting that data set. I'm not exactly sure where Dancer's End would be on this map, but I'm assuming it's kind of somewhere around about
further up.
Oh, is it? Okay, so still.
Where Hertfordshire sits.
Oh, right, okay. The one thing I would say is that this is the SRS. So all of the records here, other than, let's just go to it. Let's just talk about recording first. So why aren't people why weren't they recording spiders? Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is actually the second edition. Some of you may have a slightly different cover, but it's essentially the same book, written by Lawrence B., Helen Smith and Jeff Oxford. It's the first real proper field guide that covers most spiders. Yes, Dick Jones had a photographic guide, and there's been other smaller things. FSC did a little fold-out guide to some, but it's the first field guide. And you're going to see a chart later on which is actually going to show a massive increase in the number of records. It's interesting, I can't remember whether it was Alan or Martin in terms of declining number of records. I think it was probably Alan. Spiders, it's absolutely the opposite, but we'll see a chart in a minute. So we've got a good field guide, we've got superb online resources. I haven't put them up on the chart, but if you go on there, you've got a couple in Switzerland that talk about how to separate species. There's a Belgian website, it's called The Spiders of Belgium and France by Pierre Auger, that has photographs and lots of photographs of individual species, not only showing the spider, but also showing their genitalia. So if you do want to get involved with a microscope later, you can go straight to that. There's obviously a lot of books. There's ID help on social media, so BAS run a Twitter account. I think that's how we got Linda involved in recording spiders to start with. I'm persuaded her to go on Twitter. Probably not the place to be nowadays with Elon Musk, but we'll leave that one there. But there are other Facebook groups and Blue Sky as well. And of course, macro photography is now pretty much available to all of us. It's astonishing the pictures you can get on a mobile phone. So you don't need these long telescopes. Certainly photographs, you might not get them published, but good enough to have the records verified. Why record spiders? Well, because they've been neglected. I've kind of said amateur naturalists tend to have left them. Few records, you saw that 5,500. Just compare that to birds. I used to do the bird report for the Bucks Bird Club group, so the sort of monthly report. And we collected all the records again for our internet site. We could get somewhere of the order of 25,000 individual bird records a year. And the total number of records of spiders is 6,000. So it kind of shows you the disparity. But also, and again, I think we heard it from Martin, and to some degree from Helen, increasing new number of inventive introduced species. And sadly, a lot of those actually do come in on things like pot plants. You know, I find it surprising that we haven't got a way of controlling that. Helen's picked it up, these millipedes coming in. There's a recorder in Bucks down, he actually lives in the Chalfonts, but he visits Ivor Garden Centre, God knows how many times a week. And he puts his records into iRecord, which is what I'm going to encourage you all to do, by the way. And I just looked this week doing some actually verification. There are about 25 species of spider, not typically found in Britain, he'd found in Ivor Garden Centre in the last month. Now, clearly, a lot of those don't survive, but some of them do. So that's why we need to be recording. We need to understand what's happening. And of course, climate change. And of course, this one is the one that has for a long time attracted all the attention. I'm sure I've asked, who knows what that is? Go on, hands up rather than people shouting. Yeah, so there's a lot of hands gone up. Steatodon nobilis, the noble false widow spider, attracts headlines from the tabloid media, sadly, with an absolute load of twaddle. Can they bite? Yeah, you grab hold of it and try and squeeze it. Of course it's going to bite you, it wants to try and get away. But they're not aggressive spiders. Is that bite going to cause you to lose your arms or your legs? Absolutely not. It's not that sort of toxin, but clearly if something's puncturing your skin, the spider, God knows where it's been putting its jaws, it's possible that you can introduce an infection if you don't clean it or look after it properly. So I'm not saying you don't become infected, but they are really, really common spiders. You know, I live in the north of the county, just south of Buckingham. In my garden in the autumn, I probably have 100 individuals of these on my garden fence. So you go out and look for them, they're everywhere. Are they new? No. First record is from the middle of the 19th century. So I actually think the spider originally came in with imports of bananas from the Canary Islands, but it's now almost all around the world. But because they are aggressive and successful spiders, they could be displacing other parts of our fauna. We don't know because there's not enough work being done on it, but they could be taking habitat or niche from another species of spider that probably should be here. But without the records, we don't know. And that's kind of showing the spread. So the chart on the left is actually records from 1984. So very few, as the climate's warmed up. This spider's still very much southerly, but there's a record up there from the Orkneys. So, you know, these things do travel around. Here's another one. I saw Julia somewhere in there. There's Julia. Julia should recognise this picture. It's from records, even incidental records. So I said I want more of you actively recording spiders. But if you stumble on something, take a picture of it, and either put it straight into iRecord. I do the verification in Buckinghamshire, put it straight into iRecord and we'll look at it. Julia didn't, she sent this to me by email. That's acceptable as well. Sue found one very similar to this. It's very rare, but it's one of those spiders. Again, we don't need genitalia. Anyone else know what it is? Not Sue and not Julia. Let me blow it up and see if you've got a better idea. I'll actually put it up there on my side. That huge pair of jaws, it is the only tarantula-type spider that we have in the UK. So most spiders' jaws, they come laterally. So they're kind of pincer movement left to right. The purseweb spider, which this is, and this is a very young juvenile. This was tiny, Julia, wasn't it? It was, 2 or 3 millimetres. But they've still got those massive jaws on the front. And they strike vertically up and down. Wasn't, but it is a very rare spider now in the country, largely with agricultural intensification. So it's a spider traditionally of chalk grassland, does occur in other places. It's got a very distinctive web, hence the name purseweb spider. Lives in a burrow, at least the female does, with tripwires across the top. When something goes up the top, runs up the burrow, drags its prey down. But when they're young, they do disperse. And this actually, it's rare in Bucks. Sadly, it turns out this was 300 metres into Oxfordshire. But it's over here. And there aren't any records in Oxfordshire from that area either. So go out and you look, you never know what you're going to find.
Wrap up.
Am I? Okay, right. So I'm going to skip these, just pictures of spiders. And also, don't think about traditional habitats. You might recognise the chap in the blue coat. He was up here talking on not so long ago. This is at Langley Park. They're looking in a septic tank. I think it's called a Clargister. What for? Cave spider. So big, fantastic looking spiders can occur in the weirdest places. So submitting spider records, this is the important bit. So I will go through it quickly. So this is the old website. If you Google it, you'll still find it. You can index across the top every single species of spider recorded in Britain. You can click up there where it says species index. You drill down to your spider, have something about identification, something about habitat, and you'll have a species map. But we're moving away from that. Why? Oh, sorry, I'm going to. You could, with that system, you could submit common spiders, so things that are easily identified. You've got wasp spider down the bottom, garden spiders, some of the ones I've touched on. But most of them do need some sort of verification. And so what we have done is we have worked with CEH, with Martin and his colleagues, and although you could always submit spider records into iRecord, it wasn't generally supported by the BAS. Yep. And talking about records, pick me up on it. With the SRS, the BAS was 100% confident that the vast majority, if not all of the records in that database, the IDs were correct. So we are perhaps a little bit too hard on recorders. There is no scope. Well, it might be or it mightn't be. If I can't be 100% certain, the record isn't accepted. And Mick's seen that, and Sue will have seen that in the last couple of days. Those Metalina I put up, there are two species, look almost identical. In most cases, if it's in March, it's one. If it's in spring, it's one species. If it's in the autumn, it's the other. But there is some crossover. We can't be certain. And if I can't be certain, I'm not going to accept the record. Put it in as Metalina by all means, but not as Mengia segmentata. So we've worked with iRecord, and there's a lot of work gone on over the last 18 months to essentially move the SRS into iRecord. Someone asked about recording. There is a specific, what do we call these? A group form. So there is a special form for recording spiders. You don't have to use it, but we strongly encourage you to do, because it's capturing some of the phenology, some of the habitat we've had in the old system. So let's click on record, species group forms, spiders, harvestmen, pseudoscorpions are right down the bottom. So if you're putting records in here, please use that form rather than the general form. It brings you to this. You can then put your records in. I'm not going to tell you how to put a record into iRecord. I assume most of you know how to do that. And it then ends up being sitting on my computer. This is just a snapshot taken 2 days ago. I have blanked out the names. Some of the people are in this room, but I wasn't sure in terms of GDPR whether I should be putting the names up there. But nevertheless, it comes up, and as you can see, all of these have photographs. I wouldn't say they're all brilliant photographs, but in most cases, there is enough there for me to be able to say yes or no. And if we just look at these, I think this was Martin's actually, Michael with a knife here. Drusilla, yeah, I'd probably accept that. This is a wall spider. Pardosa, he's put it in as Strativaga. He's probably looked at his guide and said, oh, that looks much the same. You can't do that with Pardosa wall spiders. So, sadly, that guy, I can't remember what his name was, he's no one here, but as far as I know, it won't be accepted, but I'd accept, and the one above it, the crab spider Cysticus cristatus. Very, very common. It very well could be that species, but I can't be certain, so sadly, he's going to be disappointed. And, I said we've worked with CES, we've developed a new atlas. Now, this is not visible to the public, and some of it may change, but we now have very similar maps that are coming out of the data in iRecord, and actually this one here, I've selected SRS data and iRecord data, so I can select which data sets we use as well. And this shows all the records in Buckinghamshire. And Martin told me this morning, we have 1.4 million records in SRS. CEH can only upload them at 20,000 a time. So it's going to take a little time to get them all in. So if you look at that map and say, hang on, there are holes in here where we didn't have holes earlier, that's almost certainly because some of the data has not been uploaded. So ultimately, the SRS website will be discontinued. This will then be available from the BES website, so I don't think you're going to be able to go onto iRecord and get these maps or this atlas, but obviously it's based on their data. And with the unfathomable support that we've had from the team there getting this up and running, which we expect to be complete by the end of this year. There's a lot of tools and things you can play with. I was playing with it this week. I'm not sure I have them all, but you can put on when the records were. So the newest record goes on top. So the red records are all from the last nearly 10 years. The green ones are from prior to 1999. But if you're a recorder and saying, I'm going to go out and record spiders today, where shall I go? You've got a tool here. So, well, actually, up there in the north, I assume that's Olney and around some of the places up above Newport Pagnell. It's an area where there's a lot of old records, would be a good place to go. Why did I put them? Anyone know what the CSC does? Yeah. It's the cricket bat spider. God knows why it's cricket bat. I always think those things on its abdomen look like 3 cricket stumps. But maybe there's a bat there, but it's got holes in it. But very attractive. And this just shows the level of detail for this one species. So here we've got a map with a different underlay. I don't need to put red stars on this because it shows me exactly where the times and things are. But also, I can select other data as well. So this is the phenology at the top. At the top is the number of records, whereas down at the bottom, it's the phenology. When is the spider found? And that's another reason to record spiders. Now, just because you found one cricket bat spider, if you find it later in the year, that's important data to put in there because now we have 2 data points and you get a better idea of when they occur. So I am coming to the end. I talked earlier about declining records. This is now all spider records from Bucks. Again, I've taken it out of that map that iRecord, or Atlas that iRecord had developed for us. This shows data from SRS and iRecord. The spider book was published about here. Now, I'm not sure that's all of that because, of course, you've got iRecord coming in there recording spiders for the first time. But a huge increase in the number of records. Showing it by month, again, just talking a little bit about phenology. But don't think there are no spiders in the winter. People don't go out because it's cold and they don't want to go out and get wet. But if you're looking for things like Laniphids, it's probably one of the best times of year to do it. So, same map we saw earlier, diversity. A plea to you all. Let's improve it. I'd love to see more records. That's the way to do it. Remember, use that form if you possibly can. If anyone wants any more information, I've brought a number of these leaflets. We used them actually at one of the recorders conferences a few years ago, but nothing's changed on it. So I've got a stack of those I'll put on one of the tables. By all means, take a copy. And that's it. Thank you.